Hi everyone. We have our first user-generated question about submitting an offer and not being able to do that. Good morning, my name is Mike Rennick. I'm a senior broker team lead with Team Rennick Real Estate Services, part of that great Keller Williams on the Water family, and welcome to Real Estate Done Right. My guest this morning, as in every morning, is Michael Hankin. Good morning, Michael, welcome.
Good morning, it's good to see you and good to be here. This morning we are excited to have our first user question come in, but before we get to that, we'd like to tell you a little bit about where we are. Which is Station 400, and that's located at 400 North Lemon Avenue in Sarasota, which has a great little history, which Mike will tell you about.
So I found this on the menu this morning. In 1852, a quaint railroad depot was built in Kentland, Indiana, when the railroads were essential for long-distance travel. Passengers took pride in each trip and made time to explore the station while waiting for their train. The old depot was painstakingly pieced apart in Indiana and reassembled here in Sarasota. After much attention, the building is now reminiscent of how it looked 150 years ago. A great restaurant, great environment. We both encourage you to check it out. Now our question. So we have a user, his name is Doug. Here's what happened to him, and I got an opportunity to follow up with him. He was about ready to submit an offer to his real estate broker. And he had found a condo that he really liked. The listing agent knew the offer was coming, but for whatever reason, the listing agent had another offer, didn't wait for his, and went ahead and got the deal closed on the first offer. Now, here's what's unique about it. Doug actually, because he wasn't very happy with the way this transpired, he called the seller, and the seller was unaware that his offer was coming in that evening. So given that, let's talk about the ethics and the legality of what transpired.
Sure.
So was anything illegal with that?
The legality of it is actually much different than the practice. Legally, a seller isn't obligated to respond to any particular offer. An agent isn't obligated to present verbal offers.
Okay.
So the offer that was made by Doug, or was intended to be made by Doug, the listing agent was not obligated to tell the seller that that was going to be something that was coming. Now the practice and what should be done in that situation is of course very different. And as a broker, when you encounter that situation, how do you handle the same situation? What's your normal standard of practice?
To me, it's really easy. When I take a listing and I represent a seller, my job is to do the best job I possibly can, work the hardest, get the most potential exposure, find the qualified buyers. But in a situation like this, to me, it's really simple. The seller should have been notified that there was another offer forthcoming that evening. Let the seller make a decision whether they want to see that or not before they make a decision on the first one. We work for the seller in my mind, and I know there's different levels of brokerage relationships and all that, and we'll have future shows to talk about that. But no matter what kind of license you hold, and that's the only behavior that we would tolerate at Team Rennick, is making sure that seller is aware and then allowing him or her to make that decision. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And that's the right practice. I would agree. That's the ethical, that's the moral practice. And this is one of those situations where what the law requires differs from what's right and what should be done. And that's really the focus of our show, is when you have a situation where there's not an established requirement by the law of what needs to be done, what should be done in those situations. And this is a great example. Doug's question really illustrates the problem here, where the law doesn't have a high enough standard. And hiring the right professional can raise the standard of practice to where the law falls short.
One of the questions I asked Doug, and he did not know the answer, did the listing agent also represent the buyer on the other offer? Now, let's say they did. We have no evidence, and we're not suggesting they did. But if they had the other buyer, would that have changed anything from a legal perspective?
If they had the other buyer, it wouldn't change anything from a legal perspective, but from an ethical and moral perspective, when an agent is acting on behalf of a principal, especially if they're a single agent and a fiduciary, something I think that we'll wind up talking more about, that agent, that fiduciary, has a duty to not act against their client's interests.
Right.
And a lot of the times, the agent's own interests conflict with the client's interests. So in that particular example, the agent would have every incentive to have their own buyer have that contract, because they would get both sides of the deal, they would get double the commission.
Double payday.
And their interest in having their buyer win because they get double the commission is directly adverse to what their client would want, which is the highest price, irrespective of what their client would want. So here in this situation, even though the law doesn't say you must present both offers, you must present the verbal offer, you have to wait, you have to do what's in your client's best interest, especially on a transaction broker, here's an area where a good ethical moral agent can really make the difference. They can raise above the legal standard of practice and practice in a better way, and practice in a way which is more fair to their client and takes their client's interests first.
So it's really about doing business the right way. And I agree 100% with what you just shared. The law may set a standard, but that doesn't mean it's right. And if the ethical standard is higher, then that's what should be followed by the agent, as far as I'm concerned. And that's all we'll tolerate, is that kind of thing. Ethics is easy to define. People tell me, it's nebulous, it's soft, you can't measure it, but you can. I argue that you can. Ethics is very simply doing the right thing, even when you know no one else is watching. So that seller didn't know about the second offer, but it doesn't change the fact there was. And the right behavior would have been to let the seller make that decision. Isn't it about getting the most money for the seller, not the biggest paycheck for the agent? Isn't that the right behavior?
Interestingly enough, a transaction broker, that's not the goal.
I know.
A single agent, yes. A single agent has to work in their client's best interest, but a transaction broker does not. And I think the right way to practice, and it's not wrong to be a transaction broker, that's the standard, that's what we see most often. But I think the higher level of practice is being a single agent, where you have fiduciary duties, where you have to work in your client's best interest.
But even a transaction broker could behave by sharing there's another offer on the way.
Absolutely. Even a transaction agent can say, I'm going to have a higher level of duty. I'm going to act in the right way. I'm going to put my interests beneath my client's interests and do what's right. I'm going to do the best job I can. And that's not necessarily required from the transactional broker's obligations and duties under the law,
Right.
but it's the right way to do it. That's real estate done right.
So that's the purpose of this segment. Before we break away, I do have to share, Mike is wearing a sweater, I have a jacket on. We've become true Floridians. Mike is from this area, I'm from Michigan, but I've been down here long enough. It's probably in the upper 60s right now, and there's many parts of the country, many of you that will see this clip and say, boy, if it was in the upper 60s, I wouldn't be wearing a jacket. Bear with us, we're Floridians. I apologize for the difference in temperature. I don't apologize for being a Floridian. I love it down here. This has been great. Michigan was a great over 50 years, and I'm loving my time here. As we go forward, we want to talk about real estate done the right way. It's our hope these segments will help you when it's time to pick out a real estate agent or a real estate broker, to know more about what kind of questions to ask to make sure you get an agent that's going to behave in your best interest. Thank you for watching. Michael, thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate that. See you again next week.
Absolutely.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.